Hello, I'm Craig Constantine.
Hi, I'm Teresa Mitchell.
Hi, Teresa. As I say to almost everybody, it's a pleasure. I'm always super excited. I love talking to other people about podcasting, mostly because everybody that I know who's into podcasting is super passionate, and that just makes all the conversations more fun. We had a little chat before we started, and we were talking about creativity. And I make a couple little notes just to try and help keep my train of thought. And you mentioned self expression as one of the things, maybe the thing, if I remember your words correctly, that made you take up podcasting and dive into it. So, do you remember the moment, if there was a particular one? Do you remember the moment where you saw podcasting as a vehicle for self expression?
Honestly, I think ever since I listened to my first podcast, I thought it seemed like an awesome idea. The issue for me was I just retired as a certified financial planner at the end of last year, and it's a heavily regulated industry. So there certainly are advisors that are doing podcasts, but um, for a lot of firms, it's just,
A tightrope.
yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, I I think I was kind of born. I was born a creative person. I was in the kitchen cooking before I could read. I was what I should say. I was and am an incredible daydreamer, and I even used to draw um, fashion designs to go with my daydreams.
Mm.
As to what people would wear when I was imagining. Unfortunately, it did not go over overly well with my parents or at school. Um, but I persevered anyway, and I was a theater major in college, and um, but ended up flipping back to cooking, which I would have to say I love podcasting, but probably my life passion is food and cooking. So I was a professional chef for 15 years until the financial reality set in. And I
Mm.
just realized it was um, a lot of work for low pay
Not a career with
and
an exit
just not
strategy.
sustainable.
So you were saying that you've always seen podcasting, or you've always thought podcasting could be a creative outlet. Um, how long did it take you from like when you basically had your freedom from the financial industry to you're realizing you wanted to focus on that as, I'm going to say, your first project, because most podcasters eventually do more than one?
Um, well, I retired at the end of December. I started my financial coaching business, Lady Money, at the end of January, and um, I became a member of Pod 7, the podcasting workshop, in February. And I launched Lady Money, the podcast, in May. So I didn't waste a lot of time getting into it.
Do you find that is there something about audio that that either makes it be a really good vehicle for delivering the content you want? I mean, in one hand, it's an inverted funnel, like it makes it easier to broadcast to a larger audience than you'd be able to line up in a schedule to show up in your office. But is there something about the audio medium that you think makes it easier for conveying financial information, or is there something about the people you're trying to reach that are more approachable that way? Just kind of like digging into like why didn't you write a blog, or why didn't
Right.
you write a book, or why didn't you start on your memoirs?
Well, that is a really good question. And to be honest, Craig, I probably should have thought about all of those. But my last job in the culinary industry was for a .com. And this was back in the early 2000s. So it was earlier .com.
Yeah, the
And
heyday.
yeah, and I used to think of it as the wild, wild west because, I mean, nobody was quite sure how anything worked. The server was always crashing. You didn't really know. honestly, you didn't really know what you were doing, but it was a whole lot of fun and you were doing
Right.
it with some really exciting people. So that was just an incredible time in my life. Of course, the company didn't make it, and um, I ended up having to move on. But podcasting, to me, my perception is a very new industry. And one of the things, I don't know, I guess I was always trying to be good and play by the rules. And so podcasting just seems so exciting because I feel like I can break the rules. I feel like I can do absolutely anything I want. And
Mm.
even though I'm inexperienced, I'm really get bogged down in some of the technical aspects and either have great experiences or crash and burn when I'm interviewing because I just haven't done it enough times.
Sure.
I just absolutely love it. Love the
Mm.
people, loved the podcasting workshop, love you, love the groups that I've continued to be part of. Just, I don't know, good, bad. It's just fabulous.
Yeah, and so your energy and your passion is obviously readily like. So I've spent enough time talking with you to know that you're deeply intelligent and very good at communicating financial information. Like I can just see that, like, yeah, you're clearly good at that. But when you start talking about podcasting, the sparks fly out of your fingertips, and like the passion comes through. So I'm going to ask you. I don't often try to ask really hard questions, but let me ask you a difficult question, at which I don't have a good answer for. Just to be fair, is there something about podcasting that most people would disagree with you about? So something important that you think is true that you think other people would disagree with you about?
Well, I think there's been a lot of discussion among those of us that are getting started about the time that it takes, the steep learning
Right,
curve,
the learning
and
cliff.
just just the time learning something major that's new, and the value, especially if you're in business and using it in conjunction with that. I read something and I recently, and I can't remember where that is, but it gave me a new perspective. I've been very focused on success. Maybe in some ways I've had successes, but maybe feel like I've not really ever reached my full potential. And that's
Mm,
something I
that's a
really
good point.
want to
Yeah.
do. And so I know, yeah, it's a problem that it takes a lot of time and it's sort of bumping me off some of the effort that I would put into the actual what I'm actually doing is financial coaching for women. But the idea is failure and success, they're part of the same thing. I'm trying to wrap my brain around that, but it's starting to really make sense. And so I'm trying to not take failure too seriously, but I'm also trying to do the same thing for success and feel like, this isn't very original, but it really is the journey. It's the day to day experience. And that for me has been sterling, platinum, amazing.
Mm,
So I just look at it in a different way. And I feel like there aren't a lot of avenues for deep connection and for self expression in our world any
mm.
longer. And podcasting is one of those rare things that allows you to do both, I think, really well. So I guess if people disagreed with me, especially business owners,
Mm.
about the time versus the value, I would have to say maybe look a little deeper because I think if you are in the service industry, it's a really great showcase for your
Mm.
humanity.
That's a really good answer. And I think you touched on a number of insightful points there. And so, as you were talking about um, seeing that as a journey, like instead of seeing it as a dichotomy of success versus failure, or even a spectrum of success versus failure, my brain leapt to, do people make the same type of mistake, like seeing a false dichotomy when it comes to their financial planning? Like, I'm wondering if it's true, because I'm not the most organized financial guy. Um, Sometimes I think, I really didn't, I should have done, oh, I made this mistake, or that's, and I tend to fall into this black and white way of thinking about financial planning. And I'm just wondering, maybe some of your viewpoint on how you're seeing podcasting, maybe that's actually coming out of the way that you're coaching with financial planning. I'm totally guessing, but I'm just wondering if you see any parallels there with maybe the things that you're trying to teach and share in financial context and the things that you're realizing about podcasting.
This is a generalization, but there's a real difference between having a target audience of men versus women in what I'm trying to do. A lot of women's issue is confidence, and the fact that socially we've continued to have the financial aspects, be in the male domain. So a lot of what I'm doing with the podcast is just trying to talk in a normal conversational way
Mm,
about a lot of things that we all should be talking about, but because money is so taboo, we don't.
right.
So, and just, kind of get women to relax around it and realize it's not rocket science. It's really basically common sense. And the big mistakes, men or women, it's not the little ones. The little ones we can all survive. It's the big ones. It's the repetitive ones, or the lack of doing something.
Mm,
Saving for retirement is simple if you start soon enough. Because basically during the working years, it's all about how much you save. Given what kind of lifestyle you want later on. And in retirement, it's about how much you spend, whether you're thoughtful about
mm,
that. So that's really just not paying attention to the long-term planning is
mm,
probably, there are a lot of it's fun, like the seven big, common financial mistakes, and there's a million articles on that, but truth be told, just live within your means, save something, and do it for a long time. And
yeah,
it
the
kind of
miracle of
boils down to that.
the miracle of interest. Um, do you do you find that you get any pushback from other people? I want to say in the financial industry, but it kind of depends on where you were actually in financial and that kind of thing. But have you gotten any pushback from people about, like, don't share it? Like, so it seems to me you're making financial discussions, you're making this information super approachable. And your target audience is specific, but you're making it super approachable. Do you get any pushback from financial industry about that? Like, well, you're oversimplifying it, or don't give away the stuff that we're trying to sell, for a high premium.
No, they're actually my biggest cheerleaders because it's exactly what they don't have time to do.
Mm,
When you're as a financial planner, when you're working with a client, you absolutely ask them what their goals are. It's the money is a means to an end. So what you're trying to do with that money has to do with the heart of the financial plan and how you design the investment portfolio. But in terms of getting people to the level of having a basic understanding so that they can be a real partner with the advisor,
mm,
the advisors just don't have the time to spend on that. So most of my clients, I'm just starting out, but most of them I've gotten as referrals from financial advisors, and the feedback I get is they're ecstatic because suddenly one was a recent widow, and so she came in for her next meeting with her advisor and was much more engaged and would say, "Oh, Teresa said that," or "Yeah, I discussed that with Teresa." And
no,
so,
I had this question, right?
yeah, so it's that part is
Well, that's
really.
high
I was a little
praise.
surprised actually.
That's high praise. I mean, it's one the hey, you should try this thing, that's like the highest compliment for, to the person who made the thing. That's like as good as it gets. So if you're getting people who are in the industry who know, and they're saying, yeah, I think that's high praise. Um, are there, I was going to say, do you feel like you've already stuck yourself in a groove? Like, have you had ideas for other shows that you want to create at this point? Like, have you thought, I really want to capture my ideas about cooking? Or because for me, as soon as I did like one kind of show and I started working in a certain kind of medium and I was talking to certain kinds of people, it didn't take me very long before I started having ideas for what looked like completely different things. But from the podcaster creator's point of view, it's like, oh man, once you figure out how to do this, there's so many ways you can go with it. So if you had any like completely orthogonal ideas that you're currently sitting on, like, oh, I don't have time for that.
I feel like I may be a little inexperienced. The venues I've chosen, I do both interviews and host on mic. And for anybody that's listening that doesn't know, I would say a monologue or
Right.
just a solo venture. Um, so I feel like I have a lot to learn just about the first round, but I will have to say I've had this long time idea, and I don't know if I could pull it into podcasting, but of combining it being sort of half, financial help and half cooking show with an idea like you'd bring in somebody and the first part of it, you talk a little bit about financial mistakes or what they had learned, and then you drag somebody that is not a chef, into a kitchen to make popovers or
Mm,
something. Um, I even thought, wow, it would really be good to like team up with Susie Orman or something like that, where you could sort of have banter back and
mm,
forth. So I really think we need to shake it up. Honestly, I do feel it's a little limited having it all about financial, topics. So I do pull in mindfulness because I think that's the ultimate goal is for people to live an amazing, purposeful life. And in
mm,
order to do that, you have to have financial control of your situation. And that's the stress buster that allows you to focus on, your family and community and your sense of purpose. So um, I do that, but I think I'm doing it in too cautious a way. I really like the idea of mixing things up because I think that's what people do
yeah.
in real life.
I think that um, I'm torn between taking the time to explain a movie scene that I saw where they did just that with a grizzled, grumpy Harrison Ford character who I think played a news anchor, 40 years in the business, alcoholic, and they stick him on a morning show with a host that he just can't stand. I forget what it's called. And the host eventually manages to win him over. And in like the denouement of the movie, he cooks frittatas for them. And you get this experience of, and this had nothing to do with financial, it has to do with this old news guy. Like he's been like in war torn frontline reporting, but he's making, that's like crepes. He's making this food and he's doing this as if he's, making it for his family in his home. And at the same time, they were having a conversation that was actually meaningful about what is journalism and what's the point of a morning show. And that flashed into my mind because you clearly light up when you talk about cooking and when you talk about financial planning, and when you put the two of them together in your head just now, like you sat up straight and your hands appeared in the frame and like it was just like, oh, that's a thing. So that will be out soon. So I just think you're really onto something with finding ways to, I mean, sometimes it gets trite to say creatively combine things, but like you really have interesting ideas about how to creatively combine um, what's normally a very dry, most would say boring topic related to money and financial planning. I don't think it's boring, but a lot of people, I believe, do, with, your passion and your spark. So I think you're on the right track. Please, go, 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 as they say. Cool. All right. Well, let's call it there. As much as I hate to ever stop, the goal here is to try and keep them short so people can get them swallowed.
That makes sense.
So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
I love this. Thank you. It was really fun. Really enjoyed talking to you, Craig.